Hi everyone, my name is Danny, and I make all types of YouTube videos, including chess videos. I haven't made a chess video in a while, and the reason why I want to make this chess video is because I've been using a chess program, and I was able to beat the beginning levels. And once I got into this more advanced level, um, it just kept beating me just over and over again. Um, I've never been, I was never able to beat it ever. It must have beat me just like dozens and dozens of times. I did manage to get one draw out of it, but really, it was beating me by such huge margins. I didn't think that I would ever be able to really beat it, even with the white pieces. And so the other day, I finally did beat this advanced level. And so, yeah, that was a pretty big milestone for me, a big breakthrough. Um, Although it was with the white pieces, so I did have that advantage, but um, it was still a good goal for me to achieve. And so yeah, so in this video, I'm just going to go over the game because I think it was a pretty good game, a pretty interesting game, and I should say right from the beginning though that um, I felt that even though I beat the computer at this level. I don't know. I might be wrong about it, but I felt that it didn't really play at its normal skill, and I kind of felt that it was quite a bit. It was a little lower than it's no what I was used the skill level that I was used to. So I don't know if that was just all in my mind, or I could just make an assumption that part of the program processing, there's a part of the program that says that if it notices it's beating someone like 100 times in a row, it'll eventually just bring the skill level a little down to make it a little more reasonable. Otherwise, I think the normal person will just quit, right? Or yeah, they'll just quit that level or stop playing or whatever. So it's hard for me to say what really happened, but um, it was still a pretty high level of play, so it wasn't really that bad. But anyways, once I show you the game here in a second, you'll be able to see. So, so like I said, I am the on the white pieces, and I just wanted to quickly say that with computer chess, it can be a little dry. So this computer program has sound effects. So what you're hearing in the background is not real, like roads and cars. It's just part of the sound effects of the computer program. And what you're also going to hear is chess pieces move and stuff. And I think that I like the sound effects. I could turn them off, but I just think it makes things just a little more interesting. That being said, it's going to force me to talk a little louder because I want to make sure that everyone can hear me. The worst case scenario is when people can't hear you or can't hear you at all, right? So I'd rather overcompensate. So if I do sound a little loud, that's why. Okay, so let's just get it. Let's just get right into it. Um, so like I said, this was played just a few days ago, and so I'm just going over the game that we played before. Okay, so I play d4, and I just also want to say that I'm a little rusty. I'm not that good with notation, but um, when I watch chess videos, I think it's really important that the analyst um, verbalize the moves or the notation, it just makes it so much better. So I'm going to do that, but just be patient and knowing that I am going to say the moves or the notation, but it may be a little slower than what you're used to. So I play d4. The computer plays knight to f6. I play c4. The computer plays f6. I'm not in the mood to play the Nimzo Indian defense, play against the Nimzo Indian defense, so I play knight to f3. The computer plays d5. So this is basically the Queen's Gambit, or a transposition of the Queen's Gambit. Transposition, of course, means you get to the same position with a different order of moves. And here I play g3. So when white plays g3 in this position, at this part of the game, white is playing the Catalan, so the Catalan opening. So for me, I know that I'm purposely playing the Catalan for this particular game, for sure. So the computer plays bishop to b4, check. I play knight to d2, blocking the check. The computer castles. I play bishop to g2. This is a really important move, a basic concept of playing the Catalan, because it's targeting the center, and it's also targeting the long diagonal towards black's queen side. So there are two main categories of the Catalan. So the open Catalan is when black takes that pawn, and the closed Catalan is when black does not take that pawn. So of course, since the computer decided to take that pawn, this is now the open Catalan. So I castle. So the computer moves c3. I move knight to b3. So I don't know if I wanted to talk about why because I have a laser pointer. I think it's better than a stick, because the last time I used a stick, it's a different dimension. So if you use a stick, the dimensions that I'm seeing is different from the dimensions you're seeing. So I was pointing at a square or a piece, but the YouTube video was showing something different, right? So I'm going to try the laser pointer. I have a laser pointer. It's red, as you can see. So just try to follow my laser pointer whenever I bring it up. So basically, this is tricky because if I would have taken that pawn with this pawn, with my b2 pawn, he would have taken it with his bishop, and then he's attacking my rook, and well, okay, actually no, I made a mistake with that one. Even if he did, even if I did take that pawn with my pawn, if he took with his bishop, he's attacking. Guess he's attacking my rook, but yeah, I am right. He's attacking my rook, and he's also attacking this pawn, right? Because he's got two pieces attacking the pawn, and I'm only protecting it with one piece, my queen. So he would also take this pawn, and so not only would he be taking the pawn, but that's a very important pawn because that's a center pawn, right? So it's important right from the beginning. It's very tricky. I had, you know, I should not take that pawn. That's why I moved the knight there. Just wanted to point that out. So he decides to move his bishop back to d6. Why he did that, I'm not sure. Like, why didn't he just grab that pawn? I'm not sure. But anyways, so I take it with my pawn. And then he moves knight to d7, knight on b to d7. Then I move bishop to g5, pinning his knight. He puts a question to my bishop. I move it back to d2. And here he plays c5. For people that are familiar with the Catalan, it's important for black to eventually get in c5 to challenge my center. And so I play queen to c2. So what I'm doing is I play queen to c2 because as white, a major concept of playing the Catalan is to get in e4, right? So I'm eyeing e4, and by putting my queen here, it's protecting e4, right? And then he pushes his pawn forward to c4. So he's grabbing a little space, and at the same time, he's gaining a tempo by attacking my knight. So I move my knight back to c1, which is really not a good move for my knight to be, but I had no choice. So that was kind of a good move on his part. And here he moves bishop to a3, kind of like, for some reason, attacking my knight. Here I get in e4. This is, like I said, it's a very important move, e4. So I get that in. So the computer moves rook to e8. He's trying to support. He's eyeing that center. Here, I push my pawn forward to e5. I'm grabbing more space, and at the same time, I'm attacking his knight with a tempo. So he moves his knight to d5. That's a very good square for the knight because it's right in the middle, right in the center. And then I move my knight to e2 because it's useless. It's useless to be on c1. It's got to get back into the game at e2, more towards the center of the board. And then he moves his knight. he moves his knight. He moves his knight to b6. And the knight that he moved to b6, it was on d7. So here I move my bishop to c1. Now I moved that there because at that point where it was here, see, I can move my moves back and forth a little bit, so I'm going to do that a little bit. So here where my bishop was here, it's useless. It's positionally useless, right? All it has is this diagonal here, and it's completely blocked in with pawns, right? So this whole diagonal is really useless, and I have only that one diagonal. Like a bishop should at least have two diagonals, and I only have that one, right? And so it's completely useless for me to be there. So for me to move it, and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to exchange it with this one, right? Because this bishop is a good bishop. It has two very strong diagonals, right? And so if I can exchange that with my weak bishop, I'm trying to lessen my disadvantage. And the computer knows that, so that's why the computer didn't want to exchange and moves his bishop back to e7. Now I move my rook to b1. I need to develop that rook, and also that's an open b file, so I have to take advantage of targeting that open b file. And then he develops his bishop to d7. And then I move my knight to f4. Now, the reason that I did that was because his knight right here, that's straight in the middle. It's a very, very powerful position for the knight to be right in the middle. And so I could not, as white, I cannot let that happen. I have to get rid of this knight. So I'm trying to challenge it. So then he moves queen to c7. I exchange. He takes it with his pawn. So now, see, my bishop here is undeveloped. It's got to get back into the game, right? It doesn't really have very many squares really to pick from. So it's not really the greatest square, but it's better than being back there. And then he moves his queen to d8. See, he's planning some sort of possible attack on this diagonal here, right? Getting better using this laser pointer. And sometimes it seems it doesn't really work as well as it should be, so yeah. And then I move my rook on f to e1, right? I'm focusing on center, supporting that center pawn. And then he moves his pawn to a5. He's trying to start something up there. Then I move my queen to b2. The reason I did that was because, again, I had this open b file that I need to take advantage of, and at this point, his knight here isn't very well positioned, and there's also a pawn behind him that's also in a rather weak spot also. So then he protects his knight with that rook by moving it to a6. Because I was attacking it with two pieces. Of course, my queen and my rook. And then I move my bishop back to c1, and you ask, why would I move it all the way back there? And because at this point, and I should have known this before, but my plan at this point was to be able to push this f pawn upwards, right? Upwards to possibly support this center pawn, or upwards to exchange it and open up my f file for my rook, right? So I can plan an attack on his king side with my rook. And so I should have known that before, because now I have to waste moves by moving my bishop back to where it was before. So he moves his pawn up to a4, and so what he's doing is I move my pawn up to a3 to block it, because he's trying to push it as far up as he can, because it's being supported, and the further up, not only is it a threat for me, stop it from being too close to being queened, but also by being, if that pawn was even one square further, that would mean that I could not put any piece on this b2 square, right? So this powerful square where my queen is right now, nothing could be there, right? So I had to block that. And then he moves bishop to g4. He's sort of targeting my knight, because this knight right here is very powerful, right? It's attack. It's keeping an eye on this important center square, this important center square. So I move it for different reasons, but the main reason that I moved it was because I'm eager to move this f pawn forward, right? And I don't really want to exchange it, because this knight into the center area is very powerful, like I just said, right? So he moves his pawn forward to h5. So he's planning something, some sort of attack, right, in this area here. And then here, I move my knight to f1. And so, to bring it back a move, see, at this point, my strategy, at this point, my plan now is, um, well, thinking back, I'm trying to remember why I actually moved there. I don't think, because I'm going to talk about something later, but I don't think that I was thinking about that yet. Um, I think that the reason that I moved it, yeah, I think the main reason why I moved my knight there was because that would allow me to move it after to e3 and attack his bishop while still controlling the center. And the other reason too is that I'm not sure if I was thinking this at this point, but later on you'll see is that my plan here um, is to use this diagonal here for my bishop to attack his king side, right? So that could possibly have been my train of thought too, is to open up that diagonal. So he moves his pawn forward to h4. Again, he's trying to plan some sort of attack in here. And okay, that was my move. So I do move it to my knight to e3. So yeah, so I am attacking his bishop at this point. So he moves his bishop back to e6. And then I move my queen to e2. Now, it was all the way back here, not a bad spot, but it wasn't really doing very much, right? So by moving it here, it's giving me much more options. And I'm also eyeing another move, which you'll see in a second. So then he moves his queen to d7. So again, he's planning some sort of attack on this diagonal here, right? Yeah, some sort of attack on that diagonal. And then this was a really good move by me, I'll admit, is I move my pawn up to g4 and I'm blocking his possible attack, right? And my knight is placed very well there because it's protecting this pawn, right? So then he moves his bishop back to f8. So I think at this point it's the computer sort of knows that it's under some sort of threat. And then I move my pawn up to h3. After I analyze that, I realized that I, from one perspective, there was no need for me to move that up, but from another perspective, it's supporting this. mm, Um, it is supporting this pawn. So by supporting that pawn, it allows me to move my knight around, and it allows me to move my queen around. And then he moves his queen to c6. And here I move my pawn to f4. So I'm grabbing more space in the center, and I'm also supporting this important center pawn here, right? And that was my plan all along, like I said. And then he moves his rook to a5, and you'll see why in a second. And then I decide to grab more space in the center. Well, not really in the center anymore, but more space of the board, and attack his bishop with a tempo. So he moves it all the way back to c8, and that was such a good move by me, because now, like, it makes it more obvious now that his his bishop here, that's now on c8, it's completely useless, right? Like, I've completely blocked it in from this whole diagonal here, right? And also it's stuck here too by his own pawn, right? His own pawn is locking him down here. So it's got no squares at all. This bishop now is completely useless. So my knight was here, and so I move my knight to f1. And the reason I do that is, like I said before, is I'm trying to open up this diagonal for my bishop for an attack on his king. And here he is attacking my rook here by moving his rook to b5. And the reason that he's doing that is because one of the reasons why I think is that if he exchanges rooks, then my rook can't really protect my pawn on a3. It's only been being protected by my bishop on c1, and so it sort of ties down my bishop on c1, right? Because remember, his bishop here on f8 is targeting that pawn, right? So I move it back so that I can protect this a3 pawn, because I already know, like I said, that I'm going to be moving this bishop. And then he moves his pawn to g6, because he knows that all these pawns up here are a threat to his king, and so he's got to try to break it up, right? So I decide to push my pawn forward, right, and grab more space, and I'm more of a threat there to his king. because all of my pawns are just completely beautifully aligned there in support of each other. And here he moves his rook to b3. So he's just kind of just saying that he wants to target this pawn here, this pawn on c3, right? So okay, so I move my bishop to g5, right? Like, yes, I am sort of threatening his pawn on h4, but I don't really care about that. I already knew previously a few moves back that, especially as soon as I move that pawn, my pawn up to f6, I knew that there was a possible mate here, right, in this area. More specifically, the mate would happen if I could get my bishop to this square here, which is g7, right? So I know that I have to just mate him as quickly as possible before he moves his pieces to prevent me from being mated, because even at this point there were things that he could have did to avoid him being mated, right? And so, like, yes, I lose this pawn, but yes, I'm possibly losing my pawn on c3, but that's not really important to me because I need to make sure that I don't waste time so that I can mate this guy, right? So then he uses his bishop and takes out my pawn on a3. So he realizes that finally that he's in a lot of trouble to being mated, right? And so really one of the only routes for him is to flee his king to the left here, right? And so in order for him to have an escape route for his king to go towards the left on that 8th rank, it's got to eventually get he's got to get his bishop out of there, right? Okay, so the fact that when I moved my bishop here to h6, that's mate, right? Because, like I said, at this point, I'm blocking his only escape route. He can't move to the left anymore. He can't move to f8 anymore, right? Because of my bishop. So at this point, it's mate. But let's see if he has any tricks up his sleeves, right? So here he decides to make this weird move, right? So maybe it's just some sort of delay tactic, right? So he moves his bishop to b2. Yes, attacking my rook, but he's close to being mated. And then I further clamp down on the mate by moving my bishop to g7. And then it's another weird move by him where he's very close to being mated, but he still decides to use his bishop to take my pawn. Okay, that's not important to me. I don't care about that. I'm close to mating him. Here, I move my queen to e3. This is to allow it for my queen to move up the diagonal to h6 and mate his king. So out of desperation, he takes his bishop and takes my pawn. Let's look at that again. Yep, his bishop just takes out my pawn. Just out of desperation, he's just trying to figure out if he can find some sort of combination to prevent him from being mated. I further get closer to mating him by moving my queen to h6. He takes his bishop. His bishop takes my pawn, puts me in check out of desperation. I get out of the check by moving it to h2. His rook. His rook takes my pawn, puts me in check out of desperation. I take it out with my bishop. Okay, and then the computer does this. So just playing with this chess program for so long, you get sort of used to how it thinks. And so it's kind of like when it makes a move like this, it's obviously losing material. And so there's a reason why the computer is sort of sacrificing a piece like that, because it wants me to take that piece, right? And so it has like some sort of plan, right? And so knowing that, I don't take it, and I move to h1. Now, I'm going to make an add-on, and I'm going to analyze some of the possibilities of the scenarios of what if I decided to take that bishop out with my king. And I'm going to do that right now. So like I said, I just wanted to show a few scenarios of what could have happened. There were a few possibilities that the computer had if I did take that bishop with my king. Although there were a few scenarios, I'm just going to go over one. Okay. So, so like I said, just to reiterate, the computer basically wants me to take his bishop with my king. In the game, I didn't. But if I did, let's just go over one possible scenario. Okay, so if I did, take that bishop with my king, see, he's one move away from being mated, right? So he's in a completely desperate situation. So the only move that he has he would have is to move his queen to c5, putting me in check. Okay. If I had decided to move my king to h1 for some silly reason, right? I didn't have to move it to h1, but if I did, then he could take his bishop and put me in check. His bishop is on f3, right? Then, if for some silly reason I decided to move my king to h2, and remember, I don't have to make that move, right? It's a bad move, but I'm not forced to make that move, right? The other moves that I could have made, right? Then he would take his queen and put me in check here. So his queen moves to f2, puts me in check, and he's basically made me there, right? Because my king cannot physically move anywhere. The only thing that I could do is put my bishop there, and then of course he would just mate me. But like I said, that's just one scenario, and in order for that to have happened, I would have had to just make a few very lousy moves, and those moves, like I said, were not forced. So chances are that a player is really not, hopefully not going to make those silly moves. So now I'm back, and I'm just going to show you how the game actually continued and finished. So, like I said, I knew through experience playing with this computer program that it was not a good idea for my king to take a sacrifice of the bishop. So I moved my king to h1, and then he put me in check with his bishop on e3. I moved my bishop to g2. He took my bishop. I took his bishop. He moves his pawn forward to h3. I take it out with my queen. He puts me in check by moving his pawn forward. I take out his bishop. So the computer knows that he's one move away from being mated, so he's just doing anything he possibly can to avoid me from making that mating move. So I take out his queen, and it's definitely a win for me. But the reason that I wanted to continue is because I know I've been saying that I've played this program, but I don't know the program completely, and I'm curious about it. So I was just curious to see sort of how the computer would proceed, like how it thinks, right? I, I, I kind of assume that this computer program is kind of like the Terminator, right? Like it will not stop fighting until it's completely dead, right? So let's just see what happens, right? So wasn't paying attention. That's why I keep rewinding when I'm not paying attention, right? So his rook takes out my pawn. And so the other thing that the computer is also trying to do is it's trying to attain a stalemate, right? And I'm aware of that. So um, my rook takes his rook. He moves his pawn forward. And so I'm just going to go through the rest of the moves until the end, maybe talk a little bit. And yeah, like you do have to be a little bit careful to avoid stalemate. See, he could have moved his knight to a8. He moved it here to purposely kill himself, right? So he's trying to get a stalemate. And as you can see, the computer is like the Terminator. It will not stop um, until you unplug it. And here I had different options as to how to mate him, but I chose to use my queen to push to h8 because that was the original um, mating plan that I had from the beginning, right? Is to push my queen all the way to h8. So that's because that was the original plan. That's how I ended it. And so I noticed by looking at the time of the video that it's long. I apologize for that. It's something that I need to get better at. But on the other hand, too, it's kind of like when you do try to trim down the video, you don't want to feel like you're missing out important parts either, right? So that being said, thank you for watching this YouTube video. Thanks for watching all of my YouTube videos. I haven't been making very many chess videos, but if you want more chess videos or if you want me to make any more YouTube videos, like in general, including chess videos, for me, the way I do things is people who have YouTube accounts or YouTube careers, it's different for everybody because people go through different phases and it depends on where their channel's at. So for me, like I feel that my channel is still at kind of the beginning phases. So for me, it's all about subscriber growth, right? So if I see my subscriber count going up on a steady increase, that's telling me that people are interested in my videos. They're wanting to watch my videos, right? Because they want that notification or whatever. And so, if I see my subscriber count go up, that's going to tell me to make more videos. So please press that subscribe button, press all notifications so that you'll know whenever I post a new video, so that by the time you watch it, it won't be outdated. And basically, that's it. Peace out.